we're going to be talking about this film that hopefully all of you got a chance to see, that is about the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom. And I have been privileged to do a couple of workshops with the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom, and it is an organization I just have a deep and abiding admiration and respect for. And I'm just really thrilled that we have the founders of the Sisterhood here with us, and Zainab will introduce them in a second. So you all had the privilege of getting to see this film early. It does not officially launch until March 10th. So this is kind of the pre-publication tour that the Sisterhood leadership is doing. And we are actually also joined by some of the folks who worked on and produced the film, and you will have a chance to get some dialogue with them in breakout rooms a little later. So just a little bit of background on why we're doing this event. We at the ICJS, the Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies, we build learning communities where religious difference can become a powerful force for good. And we have been doing these types of events all year now in COVID, trying to adapt to online spaces and find ways to continue to do interreligious dialogue, interreligious learning, and interreligious activity together, even as we're online for the time being. So we love getting to work with groups like the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom as spaces where we can confront hatred and bigotry, where we can build relationships, where we can do education, dialogue, action together. And I think you're going to really enjoy getting to hear from their leaders. So
Cheryl Oletsky is the executive director and co-founder of the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom. Cheryl combined her strong leadership, relationship building, and organizational skills with her passion to rid the world of hate in starting this organization, which under her leadership has grown into a movement with members throughout the United States and Canada. Atiya Aftab is the co-founder and chair emeritus of the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom. She currently maintains her own practice providing representation to nonprofit corporations and is an adjunct professor at Rutgers University, Department of Political Science and Middle Eastern Studies program, where she is also the chair of the Center for Islamic Life. So again, we're very excited to have you here with us today. And it's truly impressive. I mean, you have created this national organization. I just want to, to start us off by just asking, how did this come about? I mean, how did you guys meet and how did you move forward? And what was your premise?
I'll give you the short version of it. I was leading a group of almost 40 people to Poland. It was primarily local Jews, but there were also a few Christians on the trip who were Holocaust scholars. And I was totally overwhelmed emotionally by what I was experiencing. And it's like it happened yesterday. It's so clear in my mind. We were on our way to Auschwitz, and I had a local Polish educator with me, and I had the microphone. I was at the front of the bus, and I said, "Sir, excuse me, but I don't see anyone who looks different from everyone else. No one of color, no one who I can identify by their dress as being Muslim or Jewish, no one Asian, no one I can identify by certain practices as being a little different. Why is that? Can you explain?" And he took the microphone out of my hand and he said, "My dear, Poland is for the Poles. And by the way, you mentioned Muslims. We don't have an issue with Muslims because they're not welcome here." Mm-hmm. And at that point, as I was pulling into Auschwitz, that I said, I can sit back and walk through on this holy ground, terrors of the past because of hate, and do nothing about it. Or I could return home and do something about the hate that I saw bubbling up. Now, this was, Atiya, about 12 years ago. And I called a local imam who I knew, and I said, I'm really scared for Muslims in the United States. Now, again, 12 years ago, I couldn't possibly foresee what's happening today to Jews, to Muslims, to people of color, to anyone who is other. But I'd like to get together with just a small group of Jewish and Muslim women so we could get to learn about each other. Because when you get rid of that ignorance, you get rid of prejudice and hate. And he said, well, you know what? I've got a great woman for you to meet. Let me put you in contact. I said, no. Just give me her phone number. Atia will tell you what happened after I called her, but we did get in touch. Our first meeting, it was electric. It was just incredible. And a movement of over 8,000 Muslim and Jewish women and teens later came out of that. So that's how it all started, with one little group of 12 women, 6 Muslim, 6 Jewish, with the commitment between a Muslim woman and a Jewish woman that we wanted to get rid of hate and get rid of ignorance. So Atia.
Yeah, I think, you're saying it did start with one group, but it started with one person, right? Cheryl had an idea. And, I think in our lives, we have ideas, and then do we always execute upon them? And when she reached out to me, I was at a point in my life where kids were young, I'm working. I was like, who is this person? And she called me and called me and called me. And I finally responded. And I was thinking to myself, I'm just going to find out who she is. I don't have time for this. And I was on the board of my mosque at that time. And had always been very involved in the community. And so when I talked to Cheryl, she's like, just, meet me for coffee. And I'm like, okay, I'll meet for coffee. That's going to be the end of it. And when we met, we immediately hit it off. And we hit it off really as 2 women coming from, even though we live in the same geographic area, our lives are very different. I don't see that our paths would have crossed in terms of our jobs, careers, family. I mean, they just would never have crossed, probably naturally, but it was meant to be. So we really hit it off. And I, as a Muslim woman, I thought to myself, if someone's extending their hand to me to do good works, and I have, I think that I can accomplish what she's asking me to do, which really was just to establish a friendship. Why should I not take the hand that's being extended to me and make it work? And I think that to me, that's I'm inspired by that. And I hope that that's what inspires others, that you can make a difference one step at a time. And so we gathered a group of 5 other Muslim women, 5 other Jewish women. We met in my home. And as Charles said, it was electric. We were talking on top of each other because we just couldn't believe how many common points we had. And not just that, because I don't want to gloss this over. I think we were all very relieved to be in a space that we could talk about interesting, sometimes controversial things that you can't talk about at work. We're well out of college. So, I mean, those are also spaces, brave spaces, as they say, but we were in a space where we could ask questions that would would seem intrusive. Well, why are you doing that? Why do you believe that? Oh, this is what I believe. Oh, you believe something similar? To the evolution in our conversations, which, are shown on the film. So that's how it all started.
It's called having honest conversations.
Yes.
Just as a reminder, if everyone in the audience could just stay on mute until we get to the breakout rooms, that would be great. So I get to pose the oafish white male Christian question that was also posed by Megyn Kelly in the film. Why can't I join? Why aren't you letting me in your group? Or to put it more specifically, why have you chosen to focus on just women and also on Jews and Muslims specifically?
So several parts to the answer. First of all, Matt, we've worked with you so closely. You're an honest sister.
Thank you.
So let's start with why women. And this is not a value statement toward either gender, but we know from neuroscientists that women's brains are wired differently than men's brains. And I'll quote my husband, Rabbi Olitsky, who says that women are from Genesis, men are from Leviticus. Women navigate the world through relationships for the most part, and men, for the most part, start off navigating through responsibilities, through rules. And it's a very different approach to things. When I met with Atia and we were talking about this, and our goal was, how do we build relationships based on trust and respect as quickly as possible? The first thing was we said, okay, women will do that. They will get to that point immediately. And if our goal was to do this as quickly as possible, let's start with women. So that was part one. Part two to that was that as minority women of faith, we face a lot of challenges. And I would like to believe that I'm as liberal in a non-sexist relationship as I can get. But the reality is we face a lot of challenges as Jewish and Muslim women of faith that men don't have to face. And so we said, you know, a lot of our coming together is to really open up to each other and face these challenges together and trying to figure out how to deal with it. Those are things that we don't think that other men in our life can relate to directly. And then the third part was why Jews and Muslims. And we are doing more and more, by the way, with other faith groups that are invited in, but specifically why Jews and Muslims in the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom. We were based on a mission, which was to build trust, and still is, trust and respect based on developing relationships. That's part one. Part two is because of those relationships, there is a commitment that we are going to work to stop hate toward each other, toward our faith communities, and to anyone else who is marginalized. And the hate that we felt when we started, which is, again, I keep saying this, but nowhere near the magnitude that it is today, was so much stronger toward Jews and Muslims. And the challenges we face in dealing with that hate, from everything starting with how do we help our children and how do we deal with our children, whether it's the hate they face in school and bullying or religious holidays or our faith practices, our dietary restrictions, our methods of dress, the list goes on, our holiday observances. You know, when people, I invite others to come to synagogue with me just for a Shabbat Saturday morning. And they said, okay, well, what time do services start? And I say 9 a.m. and they're over about 12 or 1 o'clock. And they say, no, really. And I say, no, really. So just the differences are so strong. We said, okay, let's start here. We've got so many challenges that are unique to both our faith groups. Let's start here. And until we can overcome the challenges we're facing and then say, okay, let's open the tent and bring in so many others in what we're doing, we'll stay with where we're at. And again, I never thought we would see the day where hate targeting Jews and Muslims is at the rate it's at today, which says to me we still have so much work to do. And there's still so many Jewish women and Muslim women and Jewish teenage girls and Muslim teenage girls that are not part of the sisterhood. That until we have every Muslim and Jewish woman and teenage girl involved, we'll just keep trying to do more and more outreach. Did you want to add to that, Atiya?
Sure, a couple of things. One is that as you guys are all in interfaith work, and in the interfaith work that I had been involved in as a member of my masjid, my mosque for so many years, had been actually quite disappointing. And it had really kind of revolved around how the joke starts, you know, a rabbi, a priest, and an imam, all men, walk into a room and they simply have the microphone and kind of give a 101 about the religion. There's just, I felt just completely lacking. I could have read that on the internet. Not that that's a good source, but you know what I'm talking about. So it was not about building relationships. It wasn't talking about how one lives their faith. So one of the things that Cheryl and I said is that we wanted to stay out of our, I was on the board at my mosque. Cheryl's married to a rabbi and is a mother of 2 rabbis. And so we're very involved with our religious institutions, but we made a very concerted effort to say, we're not involving our religious institutions in the sense that We wanted women to get together in each other's homes and really make personal connections. So the segue, so number one is that's kind of why it was important to have women. And the segue is that when we are inviting people into our homes, we're inviting them to meet our families. So even though officially it's a women's organization, I'm very close with Cheryl's husband and her family. She's very close with my husband and my family. So when we're involved, our families are involved. The men in our lives are involved, our parents, our children. So, I think that it's just, we started off this way because, you have to start off with a foundation, a strong foundation. But the effects of the work that we're doing really carry way beyond Muslims and Jews and just women.
I was just going to say also, we will be successful when I don't look at Atiya and consider Atiya my Muslim sister, and Atiya doesn't consider me her Jewish sister, but it's my sister. And that's our dream, to get to the point. And then our dream is that we don't have, Reverend Katie is not my Christian sister. Katie's my sister. And that's where we're all moving toward. I see a lot of chats about how you join. We will get to that when we're answering questions.
I mean, so many things that you said really resonate with me. I mean, just to give an example, my husband attends a Thursday, Quran circle every Thursday night. I have, there are Muslim women in the room who every Friday night we gather around the same Quranic scripture. And it's really such a different kind of approach. There's so much more, women open up more. They really seek out to share more of the intimate and private world and connect on a deeper level. So it's just a very different way of connecting to each other that I think you both really stress how, women connect on a deeper level, rather than here is a more formal kind of connection and the focus on the outward thing. And then also, Atiya, what you said about, creating the brave spaces. I think we at ICJS are privileged to be, also trying to create these kind of spaces where we can talk about religion. But as you said, and you both, acknowledge that there is a lot of distrust in our communities, a climate of suspicion almost. How do you address that? I mean, especially when it comes to, Atiya going into the Muslim communities, the Jews having a secret agenda. How did you wrestle with that?
Sure. Well, I first of all remind my Muslim brothers and sisters that Muslims and Jews have had a relationship for over 1,400 years. So it's a little reminder there, a little history, and that most of those decades, or those, over 1,000 years, have been relatively peaceful. Jewish communities have lived amongst majority Muslim, world for the majority of that history. And I don't want to also paint it over as rose color, but that's a fact. In fact, well, I won't get into recent politics, but my point is that we look at our relationship from a faith perspective, and we're looking at the long picture, the big picture. However, we don't, as you saw in the film, we don't avoid the fact that in the contemporary lens, there is a challenge between Muslims and Jews, maybe within the context of Israel and Palestine. And I think, and it shows in the film, that while many of us had trepidation, and I say us because that included me, and I know that included Cheryl, because we didn't want to destroy our relationship. But we I think have discovered through the years that we actually have fallen on we have the same values on this issue, human rights issue, and we see things actually more broadly than we thought, and more in common perhaps than we thought. So how do we deal with it? We don't pretend that the conflict doesn't exist, but what we focus on is our common faith values, and what we focus on our common interests as Americans. And right now, we are, both of our religious groups are subject to a lot of hate. And so we have no reason not to come to the same table, and to not take an attitude of, okay, I may not know, but just because you're Jewish means you have this perspective on Israel. And just because I'm Muslim, I have this perspective on Palestine, therefore I'm not going to sit at the table with you. We found that when we did our research, when we first formed the organization, that organizations that were founded on the Arab-Israeli or Palestine-Israeli conflict fell apart pretty quickly, because they were set on a, on a bed of conflict, as part of their foundational kind of, value. And that's not what we're about. We're about, let's get to know each other. Let's walk in each other's shoes. Let's learn each other's stories. And maybe we can come to a better understanding that way. Maybe we can come to an understanding that way, learn to love and respect. So I think, again, it's looking at things broadly. And Zainab, you're Muslim. Muslims come from 55 majority countries in the world. We have more interfaith problems. And I found, and Cheryl, I think you're going to echo this, when we went on our Building Bridges trips, some of the most, some of the most exciting debates on the buses were between the Muslims and between the Jews. So, you know what? We have to learn amongst all human beings that we always, even if people are from the same country, or the same village, the same this, they can find some difference to argue about. So let's, again, it's about focus.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and really grateful that you're raising that we cannot avoid conflict, even in families. Always tension and disagreements and so forth. And I really like your emphasis on let's also focus pre-Holocaust. Let's focus pre-Palestine, Israel, because there has been such a long relationship, and you're trying to recreate that new narrative and really trying to bring in that rich history. And reframing and reworking that relationship again.
One of our Building Bridges trips was to Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is a Muslim majority country, out of the Soviet Union, and it was amazing because we met with two Jewish communities, one particular Jewish community that had been living in a Muslim majority for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we met with that community. And for a lot of the Muslims on that trip, and I think that was very surprising for a lot of my Jewish sisters, just the fact of knowing that. And also for Muslims, and also for many of the Muslims who are on the trip, who are majority Sunni Muslims, we were in a majority Shia country. And that was a different experience for a lot of the Sunni Muslims. So there was a lot of learning on that trip on everyone's side. And I think, again, if you're in the room with an open attitude of I'm here to learn, I know that I can gain something from you, then I think when you're within that spirit, and we're a voluntary organization, right? No one's forcing you to be in the room. I think a lot of magic can happen.
I mean, what the only thing I would add to that is we're based, our theory of change is contact effects and extended contact effects. And for those of you that aren't aware of it, here's the essence of it. And that's what this is all about. And it answers your question, Zainab, which is it's easy to hate someone you don't know. When you know them, it's harder to hate them. And when you care about them and really love them, it's almost impossible. So what we've done in the sisterhood is said, the door is open. If you want to be in it, we are embracing you and welcoming you. And we guarantee that you will change your perceptions because of how much you care about each other. If you're not ready, when you're ready, come, it'll be there. And what we have found over, T and I have been doing this for about 11 years. We became a 501c3. We became an organization, the very end of 13, is people initially who said, I don't want to be a part of this, no way. After seeing us in action, they said, wait a minute, there's something here. And they have since joined, and we get new people joining all the time because of that. But if someone's not ready, that's fine. When you're ready, we're here.
So I want to, before we pivot and start talking about some of the audience questions, I want to talk about the moment that we're in right now as a country. Obviously, we have been through a very crazy, let's say 5 years, just to encapsulate all of it. And even just within the last couple of months, right, with the storming of the Capitol, resurgent white nationalism, conspiracy theories on the rise. I'd love to just hear your reflections on what are the prospects for religious pluralism in America right now? What are the challenges we're facing? What are your hopes? What are your fears? How are you thinking about this moment that we're all kind of trying to navigate through at this present time? So
I started the sisterhood after being in Poland. And after being in what I consider, and by the way, a few years ago, we did the first trip of Muslim and Jewish women to go to Auschwitz together. And we sat there in a prayer circle. The Jewish women saying a prayer for their relatives or friends' relatives who had perished in the Holocaust, and the Muslim sisters reading the names of 63 Muslims who died at Auschwitz. And I started this because I was petrified that what happened to Jews and Romas and so many others was going to happen to my Muslim brothers and sisters in the United States. I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I am petrified today, because what I see, and January 6th and so many, unfortunately, examples and everyday new examples are out there, but it's the 30s and early 40s all over again. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I was petrified. One day, my little granddaughter, I don't know if you know what a mezuzah is, but Jewish people will often put a small thing on their doorpost with a prayer inside that you put on Jewish homes. And she asked her dad, who happens to be a rabbi also, to remove it from the home because she was afraid that someone would walk by and they would know it was a Jewish home and they would bomb the home. No one should have that fear, and certainly not a child. So I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I am petrified right now. But the only things that give me hope are organizations like the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom, that embrace pluralism, that embrace diversity, and said, we are going to continue to be proud of who we are. We are not going to hide our faith affiliation, and we are going to band together to rise up and speak out and act out peacefully against hate. That did not happen in the 30s. It surely did not happen in the early 40s. I mean, yes, we had some heroes out there, but it wasn't a public response. It wasn't a public response that we saw after George Floyd was killed. It wasn't the public response we saw after the insurrection on January 6th. And we've got, we say, our 8,000 Muslim and Jewish foot soldiers who are out there saying, we're not going to take this, and we're not going to take it, and we're going to peacefully show how love is stronger than hate. That's the only thing that keeps me going. And it's because of the pluralism of bringing together not only two different faith groups, but so much difference within each faith group, and saying, we respect it, we've got the trust, and because of that, we're going to have each other's backs and the backs of the others in this country. The hate is trying to overcome things, and we're not going to let it. Atia?
I mean, I think that I'm going to answer this a little on a personal level, that I am very happy with the election. I am very happy that we have leaders who are saying to me the right things, the values that I share about we are one humanity. We say in Islam, one ummah, which unfortunately gets sometimes translated as one Muslim community, but ummah just means community. We are one humanity, one community. And my Muslim values tell me that, you know, God created us intentionally different, and that's not something that should divide us. And so I have no problem being a Muslim in America. I think that I would have a lot of problems being a Muslim in many Muslim majority countries. I visited many, many Muslim majority countries around the world. My mother grew up Catholic in England. She was a minority. She's a convert, a Muslim convert. My father grew up in India as a Muslim amongst a majority Hindu population that had a very difficult time. And so me being a Muslim in America and being a minority, I don't find any problems with that in terms of being able to exercise my faith. At the same time, I think that we have to speak up. We have to speak up in whatever sphere we're in. If your sphere is just your family, speak up. If you're in some sort of leadership position, speak up. And I know that you know, it says in the Quran, and this is mirrored from the Old Testament, you save one life as if you save the world. So save your life or one other life, and that ripple will make a difference in the world. And if we all can kind of share that value, and that's all of our value, I think that will make a difference. And we have to speak out. And I think when we as a nation did not speak out, I think 4 years ago, we got what we got.
I mean, these are such beautiful words, and there's already, I can feel the passion in the room. People are already like excited, and we're getting, from the audience questions, Shelly Mintz and Cheryl Savage asking both, how can I join? This is such an awesome, initiative, and I really want to make a difference. And you already said, these are some practical things. And Atiya, especially as a Muslim, listening to you, so much what you're saying resonates completely with me. And it's true that we need to go back to the primordial covenant, where all souls, all created, like in the Christian tradition, the image of God. In Islam, we affirm that same belief that we have all that divine spark within us. So we really need to keep the focus on the basic question. But we want to turn to our audience and really also, practically, how can I join? And are there local chapters? Yesterday I actually asked the question to Matt, are there local chapters where people can join? How can we support you?
You're all very lucky to have Sammy on today, because Sammy is our assistant director and is responsible for membership. So Sammy, if you could put your contact information in the chat, Sammy will help you with joining the sisterhood, and whether or not we have a chapter available in the Baltimore area where most of you are. Sammy could help you if you're interested in taking on a leadership position to start a chapter. And we also have community membership. We have programs several times a month that are open to everyone, and we have regional programs. And so we would welcome your involvement, and just email Sammy, and Sammy will take great care of you and welcome you in. I just wanted to add also, we have an annual conference that is open to everyone. And if you come to our website, you will see everything that is happening in the sisterhood and what's open, and we welcome all of you.
We have a question from a member of the audience about, we sometimes talk about the distinction between interfaith dialogue and intra-faith dialogue, the conversations that go on within our religious communities and religious traditions. So somebody's asking, what are the challenges with the different sects that within the Jewish community, within the Muslim community, and how do your relationships build on or affect some of the challenges that you might encounter in some of the intra-faith spaces as well?
Tia addressed this a little bit. We have more challenges with being compassionate listeners and having respect when it comes to intra-faith issues than interfaith issues. So for example, very observant Jewish women with Jewish women who are less observant, and attitudes about, well, why can't I meet on a Friday night? Or why can't we meet on a Saturday morning? Or why can't I bring in food from my house into this house? Just because they keep kosher, why should I? Very similar issues with the Muslim woman. And what we try to teach is that this is all about learning. And I think one of the things we might talk about later is holy envy, and that's a perfect example how we've taken inter as well as intra-faith issues and really grown from it. So what we work with the sisters about is not to have this be a challenge, but to have this be a beautiful thing that we could learn from. We train the co-leaders, we train the regional coordinators on how to deal with it. But what we have learned, and look, the leadership of ICJS, and many of you know this as well as I do, intra-faith is a very common challenge we all face. And so it's all about, there's no one right way or wrong way doing anything. And the other thing I'll say to that is, what we also learned is part of the interfaith issues our insecurity. And our sisters feeling like, well, I don't know as much as she does. And so that creates this wall or almost this hostility sometimes, as opposed to what we try to work with them about is, well, that's really interesting. I'm Jewish too, or I'm Muslim too, but I don't really know much about that. Can you help me to understand? And then we also encourage the sisters when they leave a meeting or a program, if they've heard about something that one of their sisters is doing that they don't know that much about, go learn about it and then bring it back to our next meeting and let's discuss it.
Mhm.
So Atia, you've dealt with a lot of the interfaith issues. You want to add to that?
I think that we don't, what we're trying to do is that no difference should be a barrier. So I know a couple of issues, I'll just really speak for the Muslim community, and particularly women, could be challenges surrounding how practicing some Muslims are. Some Muslims pray frequently, some don't. Some observe stricter levels of their dietary restrictions, some don't. And so the idea is, let's come to a common point. You know, we can talk about why we share, why we have those differences. And, you know, from theological levels, from religious levels, there are differences. You know, a headscarf becomes a point of discussion and difference, but it shouldn't be a barrier. And that's what the point is. The point is that how do you live your Islam? And we're all on a different, all of us in our lives are on paths. We pivot, we change, I hope at least that we learn and live and learn, as they say. So, and I think Cheryl just touched on this. This shouldn't be a point of fear and then you shut down and it becomes a point of disagreement. But these differences, again, should be points where we can talk about them and overcome them. And I understand that sometimes people cannot do that. They're just not at that, they don't have the ability or they're just not interested. But I personally do believe that people can do that. And that's what we're trying to model.
Yeah, I think, again, that's such an important point you're raising. And I think even just like looking intra-Islamically, you see, everybody is in who says there's no God but God and Muhammad is the messenger. I mean, even the Muslim community kept it so inclusive and saying, whatever your practice and legal views are, you are in. If you affirm that, you are in the club. And so sometimes we as Muslims trying to like create certain barriers and then, that translates into interfaith, really focusing on the differences too much. And I think that becomes an issue.
And I deal with that on college campuses. It becomes, are you hijabi or non-hijabi? We're this clique, that clique. And, and I know that, you're at a certain age in your life where sometimes, your identity visible and unvisible are, marks, they're your badges, right? And so that's why I said people are going through their own level of growth points. And I think we have to, again, step back. And I also want to recognize, and the Jewish community as an institutional religion has been in this country a lot for, longer than Muslims as an institution. And so the Muslim community is going to go through many, many growing pains in this process of adapting to an American culture. African-American Muslims have been there a lot longer than immigrant populations have. And culture is strong. So what the American Muslim experience is going to be, which is not a one thing, it's going to be nuanced, is going to look very interesting in the next couple of generations. So I think that all of Muslims also, particularly from an immigrant background, have to like take a breath and see how life unfolds for themselves and their children.
And to really embrace, again, something that I personally always stress, that everybody is on their own spiritual journey and their own spiritual evolution, and that we all go through that growth you mentioned. I want to turn back to a question that Christine is asking, especially, again, the practical aspect of your work. She says, I love the teen aspect of what you're doing. Can you share how many teens you have and how it's growing? I mean, you are practically raising the next generation of people doing your work. So how does this look like? Could you describe this for us a little bit?
Absolutely. So we've got 20 teen chapters right now. And so let's say there's 10 to 16 girls in a chapter. You could do the math. It's 200 plus girls involved. And we are now starting programming where we're opening the tent to welcome in more teens. So if a chapter doesn't work for them, and we still want them involved, and they could be involved in other programming, but they don't have to commit to a chapter. And for these teens, it has absolutely changed their lives. And it's our hope that once they graduate and from college, they will then become part of young adult chapters and still stay in the sisterhood. As Atia could tell you, and those that work on college campuses, we believe and we have seen with our teens, and not that many have, because it's still fairly young, have gone through our teen chapters and off to college. But there's a lot of toxicity on campus, primarily because of Israel and Palestine. And when the girls go through this experience, they relate very differently to what's happening on campus between Jews and Muslims. And we believe the younger we could get them, the greater the opportunity to go back to what we said. It's easy to hate someone you don't know, but when you know them, it's harder. When you care and love them, it's impossible. If we could start it when they're preteens and teens, just think of the impact and the greater impact we can have.
Yeah, I think what we try to do what we're trying to do as a sisterhood, and it's been our own growth, is that there are many paths to participate. So whether that's, when you're younger as a teen, when you're beyond teen as an older adult woman in chapters, attending our annual conference gathering, participating in our Building Bridges trips, participating in our Sadaka Day, in December, or in, our Earth Day programs in April. There's just many paths to enter, and it's really up to how much time and how much commitment you have. So, I mean, that's what we're trying to meet, the practical needs of the people who are interested in doing this work, but who have, a range of time that they can put in.
We want, as you go into these rooms, to have some time to actually just talk about the film and some of your own experience of viewing it. And so when you get into the rooms, we'll send you there in just a minute. Go ahead and go around and introduce yourselves. And just maybe as you're introducing yourselves, say something some impression or thing that you were struck by as you were watching the film, assuming that you got a chance to watch it. And then we have 2 discussion questions, and we're going to put those in the chat right now. So thank you, Josh, for putting those in the chat. So the first question is, what does this film show about the engagement of religious diversity in the United States? So thinking about the broader landscape of engaging religious diversity, what are you learning from the film? And especially as it relates to personal and political identities. And then are there any points of view that are missing in the film that you want to kind of raise up in your own discussion? And the second question is, how are affective qualities, affective, as in the kind of a more emotional or personal qualities like courage and empathy, helpful when crossing lines of difference or when confronting hate? So we're going to send you into those discussion rooms, and then we'll come back and we'll have a couple quick announcements, and we'll have a last word from Cheryl and Atia.
Welcome back, everyone. It sounds like everybody had some great conversation and discussion in their small groups. It always feels too short. That's how it felt for me. I hear that others felt the same way. So actually lots of questions came up, wonderful questions. And if they are unanswered, please throw them into the chat. The chat will be saved, the conversation, and we can take these questions and give them to Cheryl and Atia and the filmmakers. And they're always looking forward to receive constructive feedback and questions. And if you just didn't have enough time in your breakout rooms, again, we see people, fortunately, ICJS has a 3-part mini course starting next week. in which my wonderful Jewish scholar and colleague Ben Sachs and I will be exploring the borders of Islam and Judaism, specifically the role of Jesus in our two religious traditions. There are morning or afternoon sessions available, and Josh is providing the link in the chat, so feel free to check it out. So I'll now turn it over to Matt to close us out.
We have one last question that we want to pose to Cheryl and Atiya, and it comes out of this concept that comes from the Christian theologian Krister Stendahl, and he talks about in interfaith dialogue, we often have experiences of holy envy, where we see something in somebody else's tradition that we wish we could incorporate and have become part of our own tradition, but we recognize that it probably is not going to happen, but it's something that we continue to admire in somebody else's tradition. So I'll let whichever you wants to go first, but maybe you could just describe one experience or one thing that you've found that you envy in the other's religious tradition through your long relationship and time working together.
So I will say, and Atiya has heard me say this prior so many times, before I met Atiya and her family and before the sisterhood, every year, right after Rosh Hashanah, you would hear me say, oh my gosh, Yom Kippur is coming up and I have to fast, and I dread it, and how am I going to get through the day? And then Atiya came into my life and the sisterhood came into my life, and I now approach fasting
For one day.
differently from what I've learned from my Muslim sisters, with a level of appreciation which I never had. Now, I am someone whose husband is a rabbi and both my sons are rabbis. So you perhaps would have thought, well, you're not going to cop an attitude about fasting. The family that surrounds you. Well, I did. I do not anymore, because I understand the power of fasting and what fasting is supposed to do. And I even now try to host an iftar every year and fast at least that day. So when my sisters come over for the iftar, I am breaking fast on a date with them. And so that's a perfect example of holy envy. I now approach it very differently than I did prior to 11 years ago.
So I always love that story, Cheryl. I guess my story of holy envy is based upon how I was raised as a Muslim in the community that I was raised in, which is in Central Jersey, which is basically Central America, right? It's the center of the universe. And if you've traveled through New Jersey on Route 1, our mosque is located in South Brunswick. It's one of the largest mosques in New Jersey. And so that's my reference point. Our mosque practices, Islam in a way that it's one open space with men and women pray in the same space, men in the front, women in the back. But our way of religious service is our imam reading in Arabic. We pray in a very formal way. When I've gone to the synagogue and in other environments with my Jewish sisters, my holy envy is when they're singing. When they're holding hands and there's a feeling of joy, which is just so not part of my experience as a Muslim. There's no singing in the mosque, in my mosque. I know other Muslims might have different experiences. We just don't do that. So I really enjoy the idea of that kind of prayer together. I also think that, you have now you have some now Canadian and American Muslims, quote unquote, who are now starting kind of writing songs that are kind of gospelish in a Muslim setting. And I think new traditions are being formed, but that's my point of envy. It's this kind of the joyous way of, I guess, practicing. And again, I want to be really careful. It's not unjoyous when I'm reading from scripture in my own tradition. It's just a different experience.
I will say one thing that is absolutely the same about our services is when I'm in synagogue, that's my time to catch up with my friends. And the rabbi will stop. He's preaching and he'll stop. And I feel these eyes on me. And it's like, Cheryl, stop it. The last time I was at the mosque with the Tia was the one that fixed us up. And I hear, Sister Cheryl, could you stop talking, please? So there are similarities to our services too. You get in trouble if you talk.
You do.
Hard for us not to talk, right?
Well, thank you both so much, Cheryl and Atia, for being with us this afternoon. This was just lovely, and congratulations on the film to you and everyone at the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom. And we're really excited to see, as this gets rolled out, the impact that it'll have on our national discourse. I really hope that it gets as widespread attention as it deserves. We hope that you'll join us for Ben and Zainab's mini course on Jewish-Christian dialogue around Jesus, which, as a Christian, I'm just very excited to hear what they have to say. And we hope that you'll join us for future upcoming events. Thank you again, all, and we will see you next time.